important facet of this war, the information war, and what U.S. officials deride as Kremlin disinformation, which matters in the global stage. It matters over in the European theater, but it also matters right here at home because some of it is being echoed on Fox News. Russia called a UN Security Council meeting today to renew its allegations that it says the U.S. might be somehow funding bioweapons in Ukraine. Now, here's what you need to know. Outside experts, the United States government, and independent press fact checks have rejected that claim. So absent further evidence, Russia did not offer any of that evidence. As I say, if there was evidence to weigh, we would do so. The U.S. is saying that this is actually all about war, not evidence, and the Kremlin might be doing something that we've seen before, laying the groundwork out in the media sphere for a false flag set of accusations to then justify its own future conduct, which could involve, we're not reporting this has happened yet, but based on precedent, the theory here is it could involve the later use of chemical weapons by Russia that it would then seek to blame on others. Here's the U.S. ambassador to the UN today.
I will say this once. Ukraine does not have a biological weapons program. There are no Ukrainian biological weapons laboratories supported by the United States, not near Russia's border or anywhere.
That's the word from the U.S. presented on that global transparent stage at the UN. Meanwhile, the Times reports that some right-wing voices are amplifying these Kremlin accusations and conspiracies, including Tucker Carlson, who keeps casting doubt on the U.S. denials and has distorted at least one Pentagon official's words. In a recent interview, this official said Ukraine labs could not manufacture bioweapons, then saying in the Soviet era, a while back, they may have previously had that ability, but, quote, there's no place that still has any of the sort of infrastructure for researching or producing biological weapons. Pause. Take that in. No place for it. And then Tucker Carlson deliberately excises that and then suggests Pope somehow asserted the exact opposite.
Because as Pope put it, scientists are scientists. They don't want to destroy all the bioweapons. Instead, they're using them to conduct new bioweapons research. That's what he said.
That's not what he said. Pope said the opposite. And while it's perfectly fine for anyone, citizen or journalist, to be skeptical of things you hear from the U.S. government, being skeptical, maybe not taking denials at face value, is different from being in the media and misconstruing and falsely asserting what the U.S. says. Pretty straightforward. Meanwhile, how's it playing? Again, as I said, there's more than one theater here, and I use that word deliberately. Well, in the European theater and over in Russia, Russian state TV, well, they're the ones broadcasting and repeating Carlson's attack on the U.S. And it goes beyond Tucker. There's a Fox News reporter fact-checking Sean Hannity, which became necessary on his own program, about the related issue of bioweapons.
Jennifer, but we do know Victoria Nuland admitted that labs existed. What exactly they're for, we never got clarity on, correct?
Well, we do have clarity. I have a fact sheet. That's what I was just reading from here at the Pentagon. And it is a long program that has existed where the Pentagon has partnered with these biolabs. These were Soviet-era labs. The U.S. has been very open about its involvement there with that. But what Russia does is they take that information, distort it, turn it around, and turn it into disinformation.
And that disinformation finding a home, as mentioned, in more than one theater. For facts, we go to Michael McFaul, former U.S. ambassador to the Ukraine, rejoining us as promised because we wanted to get you on this. I mean, you had to operate over there. You understand how this works. And there are people who say, gosh, isn't it simple? Isn't it naive? Isn't it easy enough to get to the facts? But gosh, if they're getting aired right here on one of the most watched conservative news networks, it would seem that some of what Putin wants, he's getting.
Yeah, Ari, I don't know how to explain it. I'm not an expert on America, but what I can say is, I deal with information and I tweet in Russian. I appear on Russian television before it was banned. I'm about to get on Ukrainian television right after you. And I interact with people inside Russia, not just elites, professors and billionaires, but also people have been following me for decades since I was the ambassador there. And I had a really interesting conversation with a young woman from Rostov the other day on Facebook Messenger, or one of the platforms. And, you know, it's clear to me that she's watching a lot of Russian state television. She's repeating back to me this blatant disinformation. But she's genuine because she knew me in a better time when we were in better relations. And she has this admiration for me. But she's like, Ambassador, but you're not telling the truth here. And I can understand in Rostov, limited information, that you would believe Putin's propaganda. I can't understand why any American who has access to information, who literally, and Mr. Carlson just twisted deliberately what Mr. Pope said. He just twisted it exactly like Putin's propagandists do on their national television. And I don't understand that. I literally cannot explain that.
You know, I've gotten to know you a little bit through interviewing you, sir, and I will say you're being diplomatic. Isn't that your way? You're being diplomatic by saying, you can't. I'll jump in, I'll try it, and then I'll let you respond. I appreciate that you diplomatically say you cannot understand how Mr. Carlson does this. I will say in response to you, there is a pattern of lying for certain agendas. And that's very different from skepticism, which we would all welcome against the government. There is nothing wrong with anyone, I don't care if they're at Fox or anyone else, saying the U.S. government asserted this, but they don't take it 100%, the fog of war, and they're going to be skeptical. We could have used more of that in some previous conflicts. I do not mean to cast aspersions against any of that. I separate that from what he's doing on Pope and what he's doing on the U.S. and the Biden administration statements, and he's doing it at great risk in this current climate and as people try to understand what the truth is. So that's the pattern. It's lying with an agenda. You didn't say it. I did. But I'll let you respond because you wanted to continue.
Well, I would just say two things. So, Ari, as you and I have talked about for years now, remember, before this war, Putin was exporting his propaganda and his ideas, Putinism. It's a kind of orthodox, nationalist, populist, anti-multilateralism. The West is decadent. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? You know that there are people in this country that talk in those terms, and he invested a ton of money into it, right? RT, Sputnik, NGOs, religious organizations, personal diplomacy, and even money for Le Pen in France. They literally lent her $9 million. And before this war, I call it the illiberal international, right? Like the communist international, I call it the illiberal international. He had these allies, Viktor Orban in Hungary, Salvini, Italy, Le Pen, France, Farage, the UK, and Mr. Trump here in the United States. One good news story about this war so far in Europe is it is now very difficult to continue with that line. You know, how can you say that they admire Mr. Trump, Mr. Putin, given all that this happened, and you've seen our alliance come together in ways that it wasn't together just a month ago, right? A month ago, Viktor Orban was closer ideologically and echoing things that Putin was saying compared to Biden. That's now changed, except for this little pocket that you're talking about. That is really strange to me. I hope that, you know, those that used to call Mr. Putin savvy and smart and isn't he brilliant will look at what's happening in Mariupol and look at the killing of civilians, innocent children, and tell the American people you consider that savvy, and then explain to the American people 850 American companies, or somewhere around that line, have made the right moral decision against economic interest to pull out of Russia, because they don't want their companies to be associated with this horrific war that Putin is conducting. And other corporations here should think about, why are they not on the right side of history right now? It is a time when there is black and white, when there are facts and no facts, and you have to take a stand. And I'm not talking about, you know, First Amendment rights. We all have that. Sure. But nobody has amplification rights to amplify Putin's propaganda.
Yeah, and the First Amendment's not a defense to defamation and libel and the knowing, malicious spreading of information. If you can prove, or if there's discovery someday and somebody sues, whether this was known, and somebody said, actually, this isn't what Pope said, and they said, well, we don't care. It's a smaller order issue that relates to the larger order. And the final thing, Ambassador, you've made such an astute point, both about the crumbling of the right-wing, phony populist movements that were supposed to be aligned with Putin, but are quaking under that because of Putin's own actions. But the other point that's underneath yours as we end another grim week in this is the truth matters. It even matters in Russia, which is why they have to lie about it. If the truth didn't matter and they could get away with anything and everything, they wouldn't have to have false flags and try to cook up fake reasons why the Ukrainians are the bad guys or they're the attackers. Because at the end of the day, it's a sign that even in Russia and in large parts of the rest of the world, being a powerful nation that just invades another for no reason, proactively, to kill people, is actually, yes, one small, low bar, highly, highly disfavored. And so I give you the final word. We ran over on time, but I give you the final word on that Putin needs to lie because apparently the truth might still hurt him in his own country.
You're absolutely right, Ari. Let me just end with two facts. Before this war, 2021 was the most repressive year in post-Soviet Russia ever, because he was getting ready for this war. So he cleaned it up. He pushed out independent media. He arrested Mr. Navalny, as we've talked about before. And just 4 or 5 days ago, the days are blending for me. I was on something called Doge TV, the last independent television station, and was speaking the truth. And it went viral, 1.5 million views in 4 hours. Guess what? He shut down Doge TV. That's not a spurious correlation, as we say in academia. That's a reason, because he doesn't want his own people to know the truth. He's afraid of the truth, and that means that the truth matters. And that's why we have to keep speaking the truth and trying to get the truth into Russia when we can. But most certainly here in the United States of America, facts matter. 2 + 2 needs to equal 4 every day, not just on Tuesdays and Thursdays.